Wendell, Wendy Braden, and most of all, our fearless leader in this endeavor, Val Hecker. Tonight, we are going to have 3 separate forums. There are 3 races that we're concerning ourselves with tonight. I don't think I mentioned my name. I'm George Schneider. Glad to be your moderator tonight. We have candidates here for State House of Representatives, District 12, the incumbent Keith Gaynor, and the challenger Adrienne Moore. We also have 2 county commissioner races that we'll be addressing. Position 1, we have Chris Branch, the incumbent commissioner, and Shauna Beeman, the challenger. And position 2, the incumbent Andy Hover, and the challenger Katie Haven. We really appreciate that all candidates could take the time to join us tonight and help fulfill the mission of this evening, which aligns itself with the League of Women Voters intent, which I'll read very short here. The purpose of this forum is to give the public a chance to become better informed voters by hearing our candidates speak to a wide range of subjects relevant to the position they are running for. We've briefly talked to the candidates just a few minutes ago to go over the rules, but for those of you who are watching on the YouTube live stream, there will be a series of questions that have been compiled both from the community and from the Grange. The first 2 questions, we allow 2 minutes for the answers. And all other questions, including the closing statement, there's 1 minute allowed. The candidates are also allowed to have a rebuttal for any other candidate's response, or even a rebuttal to a rebuttal. And they're allowed 2 rebuttals this evening, each candidate. Because you're watching on YouTube stream and the actual forum is taking place on a Zoom call, there is no opportunity for audience reaction or input this evening. But I know that the Grange would love to hear back, and you can post comments on their Facebook site. Did I say YouTube? I think we're talking Facebook, right, Simon?
We're live on YouTube.
Oh, it is a YouTube. Okay.
Yep.
So we're going to have time limits. As I said, we have a timer. Simon is in the screen with a red flag and a yellow flag. Yellow flag means there's 15 seconds left, and a red flag means time is up, and I'll enforce those time constraints. So the way we're going to work tonight is dismiss for right now the county commissioner candidates, all 4 of them, and ask Keith and Adrienne to come forward in the Zoom world here. And we will begin with the questions directed to them. As I said, they're running in District 12 for the State House of Representatives. Okay, Adrienne and Keith, I'll give the other folks a minute to turn off their videos and their audios. Okay, Keith, are you hearing me okay? The first question will be to you.
Yes.
Okay, and Adrienne, are you hearing me okay?
I am.
Okay. So 2-minute response on this one, Keith. Please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job. Furthermore, what motivates you to take on a leadership role in our state government?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Appreciate the Grange putting this on. And I guess, when you asked the question about what is in my experience and where have I been? Well, I've had a number of opportunities to be in leadership and in my experience with elected office. But when I came back to Dryden, where I've lived for all my adult life with my wife of 47 years, we have 3 children and 6 grandkids, and we live on a family farm. It's one that we purchased from my dad, and then we've added to it. And so I've had the small business experience, the experience of having crop failures and having success and learning how to budget and not always betting on the come. And when I became a county commissioner, that was one of the principles that I took with me to the commission, was that we wanted to make sure that whenever we made commitments, we actually had a good preparation financially to provide and sustain the programs that we would institute. So, in my experience as a school board member, I've had exposure to the educational side, the management side of it. As a school teacher, I was in the classroom, so I have an understanding of what that is like. And, we have a daughter who's teaching too, so I have a connection to the school. And so those things, there's so many aspects of my community service too that have prepared me for this position. When I went to the legislature, I went with the idea that local government needed to be respected. What motivates me to take on this leadership role is satisfaction in providing solutions for others and working for the people and helping them achieve success in their own lives. And at the legislative level, we're dealing with policy that does that.
Thanks, Keith. Adrienne, same question to you. Please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job. Furthermore, what motivates you to take on a leadership role in state government?
Thanks, George. And thanks to the Grange for putting this on and for Representative Gaynor for your service. I am Adrienne Moore. I'm 5th generation Eastern Washingtonian. My parents are ministers. So I was born in Eastern Washington, but we moved around the state to small towns and cities around the state. And there were 5 of us kids on a preacher's salary. So we often struggled to pay the bills and do the things that we needed to do. And I went to college knowing that I was going to pay my own way. I became a mom my first year there. And I worked full-time at a domestic violence shelter at night. I went to classes during the day and, took care of my daughter. I know what it means to struggle, and I've been on the front lines with working families and our aging neighbors and children as it's gotten harder and harder to just make it here in North Central Washington. And I've spent my career making sure more people had access to the resources that they need to thrive. I've been in the room helping get treatment for a neighbor struggling with addiction, supported moms as they try to keep their kids safe from domestic violence. I've built programs with schools and healthcare and police and EMS and behavioral healthcare. I brought in millions of dollars of resources to our region. I've led fire recovery work, and I've worked at a regional and a state level to change policy and legislation for schools and healthcare, developed a regional coalition for youth homelessness with other amazing people from across this district. And I currently sit on a statewide committee that's commissioned to make healthcare policy recommendations back to the legislature for those experiencing domestic violence, immigrants, those with disabilities. So I know the issues and I know how to lead our community towards a future for all of us here in North Central Washington.
Okay, thank you, Adrienne. Adrienne, you'll take this next question first, please. If you are selected to represent us in the legislature, on what issues would you hope to have the most impact? And what do you think is working well? And what would you choose to focus on as your priorities for change?
There's no doubt that big decisions will need to be made at a state level. We are facing massive budget shortfalls. And I have experience bringing our community and people together for recovery. I think that's going to be the focus of the next year and likely the next few years, is making sure that everybody across our district, small businesses, schools, healthcare, and the people across our district have the access to the resources that they need to recover. After the 2008 and 9 recession, budget cuts meant that many low and middle income earners lost healthcare in Washington state. It left our public health system underfunded, and we didn't have the resources we needed right now to address a pandemic. And that meant we had to stay closed for longer. That can't happen again. We need to make different choices, and we can't afford to starve our communities and our schools and our healthcare of the resources they need. So that means making some hard decisions at a state level. And I would lead on what I know best and the work that I've always done, which is ensuring that everybody has access to a thriving economy for all of us, not just those at the top, on schools and education, on healthcare, and on protecting this beautiful place that we all get to call home. As a mom and as a community member and as a leader in this community, I know the issues that are, faced by many people, by most people in this community. And I'm prepared to lead to ensure that we all get through this recovery on our feet. And that's the work that I'll do when and if I'm elected to legislature.
Thank you. Keith, if you are selected to continue to represent us in the legislature, on what issues would you hope to have the most impact? And what do you think is working well? And what would you choose to focus on as your priorities for change?
Well, I would continue to focus on the issues that I have been working on. And that's primarily things having to do with local government and transportation. In local government, we're talking about making changes to the planning process, which would allow more flexibility for local communities to accommodate anticipated growth, and also in dealing with issues that they're struggling with from a regulatory standpoint. And when you look at the 12th district, we're made up of a lot of small cities, not large populations in our county. And what we really need is strength in those local governments, because they're the people that deliver the services and are closest to the people. And if you're talking about whether it's homelessness, affordable housing, you look at any issue, it really starts at the county level, the counties and cities. And that's why it's really important at the legislative level that we're not creating any impediments to the successes happening there in those small communities and smaller towns. And from a transportation standpoint, those of you that live in the Met-How, you know quite well the bridge issue that you have going up the Met-How. That's something that I've been working on, trying to get that raised to a higher priority. It is a priority, but we really don't even have the funding for that. And yet, that's really the lifeblood of the Met-How. So I'd continue to work on that too. From a healthcare standpoint, particularly with rural health facilities, we need to make sure that those local hospitals and clinics are there for the people. And one of the issues that they have is reimbursement from the state for Medicaid services that they provide. And there's a large percentage of their patrons that are in Medicaid. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of them. I think, what's working well is that the state has really identified the issues, but what is not happening is adequate funding for the issues that they've identified.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Okay, all questions from here on are 1-minute responses. And Keith, this next question is for you first. Because health insurance is often tied to employment, many of us not only lost our jobs with the COVID-19 downturn, but our medical insurance as well. What will you do to help the newly unemployed pay for medical care during the pandemic?
Well, that is a real challenge for people that are put in those positions, and it's a difficult one to do. I mean, if you talk about universal health care, that's been on the table, but it really, from a funding standpoint, it isn't there. I mean, we don't have the dollars to do that, but that doesn't minimize or lessen the need that people have for those services. As it is right now, everyone gets care, but it is the matter of how do you pay for it. I know numerous hospitals are giving a tremendous amount of charity care. But we do have to look at it from a state standpoint of how can we make insurance more affordable, allow people to get onto programs. And quite honestly, if we open up the insurance market, there's a great opportunity for people to shop around and get other policies that would actually help them. But we do need to be really focusing on those who are being left behind.
Thanks. Adrienne, because health insurance is often tied to employment, many of us not only lost our jobs, but with the COVID-19 downturn, but our medical insurance as well. What will you do to help the newly unemployed pay for medical care during the pandemic?
Everyone has a right to health care. It is a basic human right and something I've led on at a local level and a state and regional level. I helped ensure that hundreds of people got access to health care after the Affordable Care Act came to light. Representative Gaynor talks about funding healthcare and Medicaid and improving Medicaid reimbursement rates, something that I've brought healthcare and mental health care providers together to address. And I've worked with everyone does not actually have access to care. I've worked with many who can't afford to go get the care that they need. And so they don't go, or they go to the emergency room instead. That costs us all money. That is not free care. So we agree that we need to address healthcare, but that means we actually have to find the revenue sources to do that. We can't just keep saying we need to do so. We actually have to get the new revenue sources at a state level to fund healthcare, to fund schools, to fund our community services. And that takes being a leader who's willing to say that we need, the state level needs to address our taxation system.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Adrienne, start with you. The cost to our schools to provide safe environments for students and staff has dramatically increased. So is the need for more early childhood education and mental health counseling. As a legislator who will be responsible for setting the budget in the next session, what can be done to ensure adequate funding?
As I just said, we don't have adequate funding at a state level. We have a tax system in which those at the bottom pay the most in local and state taxes, and those at the top pay the least. We need to create a fairer system so that we can fund things like schools. Education is one of the largest state budget items, but we haven't adequately funded schools for a generation. To both fund schools and get the resources that we need to make up lost time with students in the pandemic, we have to make sure that we have the revenue to cover that need. We can't continue to ask teachers to bend over backwards to provide the services for our students, and we can't afford to let students and families fall behind. So this is going to be a top priority if I'm elected to the state legislature, is to make sure that we're leading for our schools. And that's what our community is asking us to do right now, George.
Thank you, Keith. Same question. The cost to our schools to provide safe environments for students and staff has dramatically increased. So is the need for more early childhood education and mental health counseling. As a legislator who will be responsible for setting the budget in the next session, what can be done to ensure adequate funding?
The question actually, talks about the safe environment aspect, and that really is in addition to the education part of it. But education, K-12 education right now is about 52% of a $52 billion budget, and it's been set up because of the McCleary decision. The courts have ruled what needs to be funded, and what I'm in talking with superintendents, what I'm finding is that they really need more flexibility, they and their school boards, to provide the services that they need. So you mentioned counselors. Counselors are critical for kids today. And yet, if they don't quite fit the formula, they may not be able to have that counselor. They may not be able to have that school nurse. What we need to do at the state level is to allow more flexibility for the schools so that they can actually meet the needs of their communities.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Keith, if you'll respond to this one first, the next question. Given the projected budget shortfall,
George,
how do you propose to fund so many needed programs? Yes.
I think Adrienne wanted to rebut.
Oh,
so
I didn't
kind.
see the
It's okay.
rebuttal.
Well, I'll
I
come back
apologize.
next time.
Go
It's all
ahead.
right.
You have one minute for rebuttal.
You know, I absolutely, I think this is something that Representative Gaynor and I agree. Schools do need more flexibility, but I have spent years working in school districts, and I have talked to teachers and superintendents and administrators across this district. And it's not just one or the other. We have to do both. We have to adequately fund schools. And rural school districts like ours get left out of the equation again and again. The way that school funding formulas work out, we don't have adequate funding in rural districts to pay for things like counselors. We don't have adequate funding to pay for school nurses. I've been endorsed by the Washington Education Association, by the Wenatchee Education Association, by the Federation of American Teachers, and Federation of Teachers of America. And this is because I believe strongly that schools should be at the forefront, not just of flexibility and making sure that local school districts have the flexibility they need to apply their resources in the way that fits their students, but we also need funding. And again, I'll just say that means making bold and brave decisions at a state level to make sure our schools have that funding.
Okay, thank you. Keith, this is for you. Given the projected budget shortfall, how do you propose to fund so many needed programs? And would you consider an income tax on any sectors of our economy which have flourished during this pandemic?
Well, I'll just start with the income tax. I mean, that is constitutionally not allowed. We certainly are doing a B&O tax, which I think businesses are saying, that they've been taxed enough. So if they're flourishing, they will be contributing more. What we've just recently found out that what was the projected shortfall was cut roughly in half, but we're still about $4 billion short for the 2-year period, and that's not a small amount to deal with. So to look at where we're at, where we're going to go, I think we're going to have to take a look at all the programs and what programs that we have in place. If there's an opportunity to consolidate them, to create efficiencies, to allow those services to still be delivered, but in a more effective way, that certainly is what I would consider to be the highest priority for us, is to look at ways that we can still provide the service without jeopardizing, having an unbalanced budget.
Thank you. Adrienne, same question. Given the projected budget shortfall, how do you propose to fund so many needed programs? And would you consider an income tax on any sectors of our economy which have flourished during the pandemic?
The question Keith and I get asked a lot, and I, will say what he said, that it is it is in our Constitution that we will not have an income tax. It's been decided in legal cases many times, and voters have voted against it the last time it was on the ballot. So no, we won't have an income tax. Whether or not that's what I think we should or shouldn't have doesn't actually matter in this case. What I do think we have to do is absolutely find new revenue sources. I said earlier on that, the unfair tax system in Washington state puts the burden on working people, on poor people and middle class people in Washington state. And I'll tell you what, we provide incredible tax incentives for companies like Amazon. And we're grateful to have those jobs in that industry here in North Central Washington, in Washington state. And those incentives, I promise, Amazon doesn't need them. They've made billions of dollars in the middle of this pandemic, and we can distribute some of those tax incentives, some of those taxpayer dollars back to our community so that we can fund things like schools and healthcare and our community services.
Thanks. Next question to Adrienne first. Is there legislation you support or would support, which would better ensure racial justice and equity on a statewide basis? Do you feel it is appropriate for our state legislature to support Black Lives Matter?
The idea of equity is no different than the idea of being a rural person with good values. When our neighbor is hungry, we feed them. When they are weary, we give them rest. Those are the values and the morals that we were raised with in rural areas like this. And to say that we should do that on a state level is not political. That's just human. That's just humanity. That means that we are taking care of the people in our communities. So absolutely, I believe we should be looking at people who have different outcomes than the rest of us. And we should be applying the resources we have as a state to making sure that everybody reaches graduation day, that everybody has access to healthcare, that everybody has access to the resources they need. We do not start out in the same place. We do not all have access to the same resources when we're born. And that's absolutely what we should be doing as a community, as good people, and yes, as a state.
Thank you. Keith, same question. Is there legislation you would support which would better ensure racial justice and equity on a statewide basis? And do you feel it's appropriate for our state legislature to support Black Lives Matter?
You know, it's troubling to me, even in these last two years, that we were having some of the discussions at the level we were. Because I've always been, I was raised and I've always felt strongly that we're created equal. We may not all start it from the same place, but as far as the interpersonal relationships that we should be exhibiting, there really shouldn't be discrimination at any level. We've gone and had numerous attempts at legislating, non-discrimination policies. They're on the books. But the reality is that it really comes back to the individual's heart. And, I think Adrian was mentioning that, in your community, you rise up together, you support each other. And as a state, we need to be doing the same things. And unfortunately, too often we rely on legislation to dictate outcomes. And when we as individuals can really create the more meaningful outcome by our behavior.
Thank you. Keith, you'll take the next question first. At the last candidates forum, you both were in agreement on the science and impact of climate change. What steps they take to reduce our carbon footprint?
George, I'm sorry, but you froze up. Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. At the last forum, you both were in agreement on the science and impact of climate change. So what steps should our state take to reduce our carbon footprint?
Well, I think the first thing we can do is look at our forests. Our forests are the greatest carbon sink that we have, and we need to make sure that we have healthy forests on the east and west side of the state. And that's really been for some reason, it's been a real hurdle. We've had legislation to reduce, the carbon footprint, within the forest by, managing them better, keeping the trees healthy. And, as far as the climate change element of it, we are, having changing climate. It has been, that's the way it's been, but we need to be responsible. We've made tremendous strides, in the automobile industry. There's still things that can be done. I don't think we should ever be done working to reduce our carbon footprint. But really the issue comes down to how do you do it and at what cost, who is most impacted? And typically it's the rural, lower income people that pay the most.
Adrian, same question. At the last forum, you both were in agreement on the science and impact of climate change. What steps should our state take to reduce our carbon footprint?
Like no other part of our state, North Central Washington has been impacted by climate change. And we also have the potential to lead in fire prevention and management. It's absolutely true. We need to lead to improve our forest health. We need to deepen our collaboration in a federal and state and the local jurisdictions, but we also need to address the root causes that are causing these fires. I spoke to a fire ecologist last night, leading fire ecologist in our district and in our state, who said we are at the worst possible outcome that we could have projected. And Representative Gaynor has voted against climate change legislation at the state level. And we need someone who's going to lead with that same grit and determination our rural community showed when they brought us hydroelectric energy. We could be leaders in industry that reduces our carbon footprint here in North Central Washington. And that takes someone who's willing to lead on climate change at a state level from our district for our working people, for the people of this district, and for the small businesses of this district.
Thank you. Adrian, if you'll take the next question. What do we need at a state level to better support our rural healthcare system?
This is something that I've led on for a long time, that I'm passionate about, the work that I do every day in my paid job. Our healthcare system was in a crisis before the pandemic, and we are struggling in the midst of the pandemic. I've spoken with CEOs across this district. I work with them on a daily basis, and with the healthcare providers, the CMOs, the MAs, the people who are providing the care for our district. And I will tell you what they will say is, we need to fund basic services. We need to fund prevention, basic medical health care, the tried and true daily care that our communities need, not more emergency care. One of those healthcare providers said that his biggest fear was having to build an additional wing on the hospital to care for diabetes and heart disease and preventable diseases. If we were funding primary care, if everyone had access to health insurance and access to health care, we would not have those kind of preventable diseases that we do have. We have a leading healthcare system here in North Central Washington. Let's fund it, let's support it, and let's make sure that everybody has access to it.
Thank you. Keith, same question. What do we need at a state level to better support our rural healthcare system?
Well, the key thing at the state level is communicating the message of the impact to our local and rural communities. You know, what ends up happening often in the legislature is, you know, the majority is primarily made up of urban, individuals who have a different experience of healthcare. When we live in these rural communities, we're very thankful to have the clinics. We're thankful to have the primary care, and to, in our case, to have at least a central area where you can go to get, advanced services. But the state does not quite see it the way, it really impacts the people, because they typically look at the numbers and they say, this is how the formula works out. But when you have, so many different specialties within, let's say, the Puget Sound area, there are a lot more opportunities and a lot more access opportunities for people over there than we have. So we do need to make sure that rural healthcare facilities are adequately funded, that it is a sustainable funding stream, and that they can exist and provide those services to their communities.
Thank you. Keith, if you'll take the next question first. What do you think should be done at a state level to prevent a rural water crisis in our region?
Well, what should be done at the state level is a recognition, again, of how important water is to rural counties. Currently, I did sponsor a bill in the last session that was really focused on the Med-Hal and trying to keep the water in the basin. I'm working to refine that bill, and what we're trying to do is keep water in those upper watersheds so that they don't get dewatered. Because quite honestly, when the water has the value that it does, and there's an attraction to someone downstream, that water leaves, and we can't have that. It impacts the towns, the small farmers that are trying to get going, trying to create. I know that the people in the Met are trying to create some diversity, and that's really why I'm trying to make sure that there's water for them and there's flexibility, can be expanded to other beneficial uses, so that those communities can still prosper. Because without water, you literally will dry up.
Thank you. Adrian, same question. What do you think should be done at the state level to prevent a rural water crisis in our region?
Water is a public good, absolutely. And it is also, legally often personal property. So we have this weird system in which we need to protect the public good of water. I water with the ditch, with the Chihuahua Canal ditch. I use it to water my garden and our fields to prevent fires from encroaching on our house. It is an absolute necessity for our way of life here in the Methow Valley, but all of North Central Washington. I agree, we had an issue with our water being sold off to the highest bidder, and it being held either in perpetuity or being sold off downstream. I agree with Representative Gaynor that can't happen. We are getting hotter and we are getting drier due to the exchange of climate and our environment. And we absolutely need to both protect the water that we do have, but we also need to plan for a future that in which we are addressing the impact of climate to not only our streams and our rivers, but also to our entire water ecosystem.
Thank you. Adrian, this will be the last question before your closing statement. And the question is there an issue on the state level that you would like to talk about that we haven't asked about?
What a good question. You know, one of the questions that's come up again and again is around Referendum 90, which is the sexual health education bill. And it's one of those areas that I know Representative Gaynor has led on in opposing the sexual health education bill. I also know that I have worked with pregnant 13-year-olds in juvenile detention, with children who have suffered sexual assault, but don't know how to tell their parents and don't know how to keep themselves safe. These are safety issues. It is being it is being backed by the American Academy of the American Association of Pediatrics. I might get that right one of these times, but I'll keep going. By law enforcement and by medical providers across this district, because it saves lives and it protects our children. I'm a mom. I don't want anybody else talking to my kids about their sexual health. And I absolutely believe that it's not for kids like Keith and mine. It's for the kids who don't have parents like us in the homes, able to protect them from the dangers that are out there. So those are one of those tricky issues. And I absolutely think it's important as a community that we have these hard conversations.
Thank you. Keith, same question. Is there a state issue that you would like to discuss that we haven't brought up?
I think to me, the most important, one of the more critical elements of the 12th district is small business. And what we've seen through the years is a lack of recognition of those entrepreneurial elements that come into play where people have dreams, they have visions of what they might be able to do as far as providing services and goods within their local communities. And the state has really not recognized the plight of the small business person because, typically the way the regulations go, the way the expectations are, you have to keep getting bigger and bigger. And then we end up complaining about, larger corporations, which I understand. I like the small town side of things. And so to me, we really have to continue to make sure that others understand how critical these small businesses are to our communities. They're the ones that reinvest in the communities. They're the ones that provide employment. They're the ones that bring some vibrancy to the communities. And we need to make sure they have a strong base.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for the prepared questions. So there's time now for a closing statement. Each of you would have 1 minute. No rebuttals allowed. And Keith, if you could take it first. Thank you.
Well, these last 2 years have been a really, learning experience for me, even though I was in county government for 16 years and was continually lobbying for things for the local government side of things. And I'm really convinced, that there's some great opportunities for the state of Washington. We really have done relatively well in spite of even some of the trials that we've had with corporations leaving like Boeing and all. But I think that, going forward for me, I will continue to commit myself to providing, a representation for the people of the 12th district, the variety of interests that are there, from recreation to, as I mentioned, small business, to farmers, to all, walks of life, because we really are stronger together. And I want to be a catalyst for change that will make that strength really apparent and vibrant, and allow for communities to grow and prosper, both economically, but more importantly, together, interpersonally working.
Thank you, Keith. Adrienne, your closing statement.
I love this district. I love the people of this district. I have spent thousands of hours on the phone after a decade of public service in this community. Small businesses are absolutely struggling. My partner owns a small business. We know what it's like to pay those taxes before pandemic. And right now it's hard. I've also spoken with small districts across this district. I've spoken with people who are struggling to understand what this pandemic is going to mean. I've spoken to teachers and to school administrators and to families who are struggling. The work that we have to do right now is big. It's hard. And I think that it takes, the kind of leadership that really knows those issues to be able to lead through this recovery, to be able to lead through a recession. I am deeply honored to be able to be part of this, and I'm deeply honored to be hopefully willing to represent all of you all in state legislature. I do want to close by just giving a moment of appreciation. After watching the debates on a national scale, I just want to say how much I respect Representative Gaynor's dedication to this district, his public service, and the civility that he brings to this role. I've spoken with people in legislature who have said—
Time's up. Sorry.
I missed it. Thank you all for being able to do this.
Thank you, Adrian Moore and Keith Gaynor, for thoughtful responses, for being here, and most importantly, for being willing to represent us on the state level. I will note for everybody that, of course, the election date is November 3rd, and here in Washington, your ballots will be mailed to you approximately October 16th. So be sure to vote. So we're going to dismiss Adrian and Keith now. Our next forum will be for position 1 of the County Board of Commissioners. And so we'll ask Chris Branch and Shauna Beeman to join us with their audio and videos. I also like to point out that for the general election, this one that's coming up, all county voters will vote for candidates in both races, both position 1 and position 2. That's not the case in the primary that we had back in August. Okay, Shauna, can you hear me okay?
I can.
And Chris?
I can hear you.
Okay, welcome. We're going to start out with first question to you, Shauna. And you have 2 minutes for response for the first 2 questions. Please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job, and what motivates you to take on a leadership role in our county government.
Well, first, I would just like to say thank you to everyone who has worked so hard to put this together for us this evening. I am a lifelong resident of Okanogan County. I grew up on a cattle ranch in Loomis, and I graduated from high school in Tenasket and college in Spokane. I've owned and operated a fencing company for 20 plus years in the county. I am also a cattle rancher and a certified egg dealer, so I've got my hand in many different venues. I'm married and I've raised 2 kids. I've always felt that it was important to give back to my community. So therefore, I've hosted a charity golf tournament, raising thousands for women to receive free mammograms. Throughout the Carlton complex, I sat on the OMAC Okanogan Long-Term Recovery Board, distributing thousands of tons of hay and throughout this fire, I've assisted in obtaining many loads of hay for hungry animals. And each year I volunteer at the Okanogan and Douglas County fairs. This year I hosted a small fur and feather show. And so that the kids' animals, the chickens and the rabbits, could be sold in the auction. I've owned my own business for 20 years, managed my budgets, dealt with suppliers, and maintained day-to-day operations and managed my employees. Additionally, I've sat on many boards and committees who I helped build budgets with and worked with them to make successful events. Because of my community involvement, I'm no stranger to the many challenges our residents in our valley face on a daily basis. And I believe my rural upbringing will help me be a compassionate listener and an understanding voice for the citizens of our entire county.
Thank you, Shauna. Chris, same question to you. Please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job. And furthermore, what motivates you to take on a leadership role in our county government?
Sure. Well, I've been married to my wife Denise for 30 years. I have two children, 3 grandchildren. My home is Omak, Washington, and I come back here, or leave and come back over many years. I've probably spent 50 years here at least. I was born in Espelum, and my home territory is all of Okanagan County, and historically across the Caldwell Reservation, which fits my district as a county commissioner. I've also spent some 8 years in and around Portland, Oregon, where I joined the U.S. Coast Guard at 17 years old. Took me up and down the Pacific Coast and some time on the East Coast. My experience includes farm worker, ranch hand, sawmill worker, logger, mechanic, and truck driver until I achieved a college education in 1990. Subsequently, I have 27 years in planning and community development, which provides me with outstanding qualifications to be a county commissioner. Adding the past 3.5 years as a county commissioner gives me 30 years in local government experience, which is, of course, the government closest to the people. I represent Eastern Washington on the Washington State Association of Counties and on the Washington State Association of Counties Legislative Steering Committee, and was engaged with the Association of Washington Cities for many years prior to that. What motivates me is this is my work. It's my passion. I know it well. I like working with people, helping people. I've been in leadership roles for over 30 years of my life. I am trained on matters of governance and land use management, and have trained others in my work with the Planning Association of Washington, an organization which I was served as president of. I work to build trust in government and to make a difference in the lives of the people of this county through the many committees and organizations I work with and serve on, with boards including healthcare and forest health, etc.
Thank you, Chris. And if you could take the next question first. If you are selected again to represent the commissioner, on what issues would you hope to have the most impact? What do you think is working well, and what would you choose to focus on as your priorities for change?
Well, opening up governments to the governance to the people and education on local government is so important to understand. It's an ongoing issue that I work very hard at. I firmly believe in creating systems that engage people. I was very much about the little guy, or am very much about the little guy, giving voice and influence to those that lack the financial resources to deal with the complexities of government. This includes healthcare, where I am engaged with healthcare agencies responsible for delivering services for the mental and physical well-being of individuals in our county, especially in an aging and adult care. I also seek solutions in water and land use management, including forest management, an area where I have expertise on extensive experience in education. I currently represent the county on forest health, collaborative work of this region. I'm exceptionally experienced in economic development work and crave working in the area of railroad and related transportation infrastructure, as well as broadband improvements that better our position to create living wage jobs for individuals and families in the county. So I think there was a second half to that question.
I asked what is working well, and what would you choose to focus on for change?
So one area of success and progress is my work with the North Central Washington Forest Health Collaborative. Increasing the pace and scale of forest treatment, which includes fuel reduction through thinning, logging, and prescribed burning, is key to this work. Engaging all interest in the process is key to moving projects forward and reducing unnecessary litigation over forest management projects. Interdepartmental communication in the county is working and improving, as well as the management of risk, where I am with our risk manager, our representative on the county's risk pool. Also, emergency management is working well, where we are learning and improving based on the experiences that we've had.
That's all the time we have, Chris. Sorry.
Okay. Yep, no problem.
Same question, Shauna, to you. If you are selected to represent us as a county commissioner, on what issues would you hope to have the most impact? And what do you think is working well? And what would you choose to focus on as priorities for change?
Well, my top three focus items in no particular order that I would focus on is lack of living wage jobs. We need to reach out to companies and businesses and attract them to develop in our county while still being mindful of and protecting our heritage and natural resources. It's really important to me that we get those jobs in here so that our kids can come back and be able to make a living here, raise their families here, just as my family raised me, because it's a beautiful county and a great place to grow up and a great place to live. It's filled with amazing people. My second area would be drug abuse and homelessness. I really feel that we need to strengthen our ability to help those with addictions and mental health issues by developing more accessible and affordable programs using a more long-term approach. The drug task, the drug task force is one area that I am passionate about strengthening. I feel that sharpening our focus on substance abuse would strengthen our community. It would help keep our kids safe by avoiding drug-related issues. My third area of concern would be fire and COVID recovery. We need to begin with addressing how and how we're going to support our businesses' needs to remain viable while recovering from the shutdowns. Long-term support for county residents is going to be needed for those affected by the fires, whether it be seeking grazing options for the ranchers, helping them through the winter ahead, or helping those who lost their homes in this summer's fires. We will need to quickly address reseeding, tree planting, stream and bank drainage stability in an effort to avoid disastrous spring runoff and flooding, as well as reestablishing forage for wildlife and cattle. So those are my main areas of focus.
Okay, thank you. Out of time on that question, but if you'll take the next one. Okanogan County has failed to produce a workable comprehensive plan despite a 2017 court order to do so. How important is such a plan, and what are the potential benefits to county residents? And excuse me, the questions from here on out are 1-minute responses.
So the county comp plan is really important because it will help people in the Met-How and of course throughout Okanogan County for future development. I think it's super important that we get those plans in place so that people can move forward with their development. And I also think it's important that we have a plan that protects our watersheds and our water basins and allows for the fish to be able to still come up the stream. We need to protect those water flows while still developing a plan that's simple and easy for people to follow and is relatively free of regulation.
Thank you. Chris, same question. Okanogan County has failed to produce a workable comprehensive plan despite a 2017 court order requiring it to do so. How important is such a plan, and what are the potential benefits to the county residents?
Well, the plan is extremely important, and there was a plan that was worked on way back in 2009, and a lot of the residents of the county were consulted on the matter, and that consultation was put aside when the next administration came into place. And it's really a difficult task to reverse something that's been, I think, treated so poorly and addressing all the issues involved. So it's very key to the zoning, because you have to have the plan in place to actually effectively zone. So it's taken a lot of time to readjust. We had a planning director that actually had resigned partway through that planning effort. And now we have somebody in there that knows planning and knows citizen involvement, which is very important to this effort. So it does take time and it takes patience, because the comprehensive plan is the means to manage those land uses that were mentioned, including just the development of land and how it affects the drainage and all these things. And so
All the time we have for that one, Chris, sorry.
yeah, that's all right.
But if you'll take the next question, how can the Board of Commissioners support the Okanagan Public Health Department in limiting the spread of COVID-19?
Well, I think one of the first things is that we set examples, because one of the biggest issues is actually implementing social distancing and wearing masks to avoid that spread. And another part of that, setting an example, is to actually listen to the healthcare officials, both at the state and county level, and respond to the science that's being presented us, rather than just making responses that are not based in any science at all, and just guessing, because the people's lives are at risk in this regard. So I think that's one of the biggest things, and of course making sure that they have the appropriate funding to do what they need to do.
Shauna, same question. How can the Board of Commissioners support the Okanagan Public Health Department in limiting the spread of COVID-19?
Well, I think one of the big things that we need to look at is making sure that our hospitals are adequately prepared to deal with the COVID-19. And I also think it's really important that we have the adequate funding in there for our health department. And we need to follow, the guidelines and the science behind COVID-19 and base our decisions on how we act based on the science behind the virus itself. So I think that giving that good background support, watching our guidelines, and also being mindful of our businesses and supporting them so that they can make good and wise and healthy decisions for our people.
Thank you, Shauna. And if you'll take the next question, please. This is a budget-related question. The county budget has seen significant reduction of our debt in recent years, but balancing the budget isn't all there is to governing. Underfunding public health and failing to be in compliance with wildfire protection guidelines leave us out of. How would you build a budget which meets the needs for these programs?
I'm sorry, you cut out partway through your question, George. Could you repeat that?
I'd be happy to. The county budget has seen significant reduction of our debt in recent years, but balancing the budget isn't all there is to governing. Underfunding public health and failing to be in compliance with wildfire protection guidelines leave us out of potential funding sources. How would you build a budget which meets needs for these programs?
I think one thing that I would do is step a little bit outside the box and seeking some grants that would help us improve some of our healthcare options in the county. And I know one thing that we kind of run into in our county is that we really only have one insurance plan that's available to most of us in the county. So I think that seeking a better insurance plan and looking for options for our residents would be one thing that I would look into. We can't always make strict budget cuts, because if we take away too much from one, then we aren't appropriately funding other areas. So I think that we will have to tighten our belts, and I think that we could make some budget cuts so that we could make services available and equitably available for all of the residents in our county by doing that.
Thank you. Chris, the same question. The county budget has seen significant reduction of our debt in recent years, but balancing the budget isn't all there is to governing. Underfunding public health, failing to be in compliance with wildfire protection guidelines, leave us out of potential funding sources. How would you build a budget which meets needs for these programs?
I think I'll answer the second part of your question first in terms of fire guidelines. And currently there is an effort to update the wildfire plan, but also the community plan, but also the mitigation plan for disasters, and those are combined. We haven't lost any opportunities at this point as a result of being behind on the county wildfire plan. We actually have negotiated with the state to make sure that the overall plan for hazard mitigation, all hazard mitigation plan, would be integrated. That project is underway. It's expected to be completed close to the end of the year. There was a little delay, of course, because of COVID and the ability to meet with, but the communities in the county have to also participate because they're a part of that plan. And then healthcare, I agree fully that we need to find and put more dollars into healthcare.
We're out of time, Chris, sorry. If you'll take the next question. There are increasing climatic changes impacting our county. We need to be able to react to both short-term needs and long-term planning. What actions would you advocate to prepare for the consequence of these changes?
That for me, that is actually preparing, being fire resilient, watching the water management issue is very important, and accepting the fact that actually, we may not have all the water we need, where there is actually some denial in that regard. We have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of studies on how to manage water. I think that we pay close attention to that and how our growth patterns are, if we're conservative about the way growth works, and make sure that we don't spread everybody all over the landscape, and pay close attention to domestic wells and that sort of thing. I think we can manage that, but we have to be aware and accept the fact that there is climate change, and we have to respond to that. And there's a problem with that right now, is that not everybody believes that that's happening.
Thank you, Chris. Shauna, there are increasing climatic changes impacting our county. We need to be able to react to both short-term and long-term planning. What actions would you advocate to prepare for the consequence of these changes?
Well, we are in a rather dry weather pattern right now, for sure. Following the science, of course, it's one of those things that we're going to have to really be prepared to be mindful of. And I think that getting a good water management plan in place is important. I think it's one of those things that will protect us in the future. It will allow us to grow, but still keep those water basins where we need them to be, so that we're prepared for drought in the future. And I think that that's going to help us short-term and long-term. And I also think that having a good growth management plan in place is important. I think that balances where people live throughout our county and the homes that are being built. And I think it helps us develop ways that the homes are built that allow us to protect them in the case of fire.
Okay, thank you. Shauna, the next question is for you. This is a long one. It's actually a quote from one of the members of our community. So I'll read it. There's a quote here and a couple of questions at the end. At a recent peaceful demonstration in Omak, there were civilians armed with semi-automatic rifles on rooftops and in front of businesses, claiming to protect Omak property from destruction at the hands of the demonstrators. The sheriff claimed that this kind of armed presence was legal as long as it was not intimidating to demonstrators or other residents. Men or women armed with such weapons do not constitute a well-regulated militia, and their presence was very intimidating to me. The questions: do you approve of this kind of armed civilian presence in our communities? And do you think such a presence could have a chilling effect on free speech?
Well, I do believe that everybody has the right to peacefully protest. But I also believe that everyone in our county has the right to follow the Constitution, and, you know, we need to protect everyone's constitutional rights. I hope that people do not feel threatened by others practicing their Second Amendment rights. I really believe that they were there, their hearts were pure, and I believe that each individual there had no evil intent or no intent in inhibiting those that were there to peacefully protest.
Thank you, Shona. Chris, I'll only ask these questions at the end unless you want me to repeat the whole statement. Do you approve of this kind of armed civilian presence in our communities? And do you think that such a presence could have a chilling effect on free speech?
Well, I think it does have an effect. And, you know, I wrote a resolution for the county commissioners, and there was concern about one piece of the language in the recitals that talked about a fact. And their fact was that there were people there that were peacefully protesting and they were intimidated. And you can't deny that. And so the other commissioners asked that I remove the part where they were intimidated by that. And I was agreeable with that only because the main part of that resolution was we do hereby resolve that violence is not the way to resolve our problems. Certainly protesting is a good way to state where you stand on something, but I'm very concerned about the exposure of assault weapons with people with their hands by their triggers when somebody's peacefully protesting. I don't think that we had the risks that some people believe that we had. I was concerned. I had other people ask me if they wanted them to come and help and be there like that, and I said I would.
All right, that's all the time we have, Chris. Sorry to cut you off. But if you'll take the next question, please. There are so many organizations asking for donations after the fires. What do you feel are the best sources of assistance for those who have suffered losses in recent fires? And why do you think these are the best resources?
Well, at this point, you know, there was some mix up in terms of who is doing that kind of work, who is involved in it. And it was at the fairgrounds, and folks came in to volunteer, and it wasn't clear who was going to be accountable for various materials that came in and went out, and donations and those sorts of things, where we can't take donations directly as cash donations at the county. So at this point, after we've gone through a lot of process, I think the best thing to do is call emergency management, and Maurice Goodall will give you the list of organizations that in fact are bona fide organizations that are prepared for the short-term and the long-term recovery in Okanagan County.
Thank you, Shauna. Same question. There are many organizations asking for donations after the fires. What do you feel are the best sources of assistance for those who have suffered losses in the fires? And why do you think these are the best resources?
Well, I truly feel like there are really a lot of great folks out there doing a lot of good things to help with fire recovery. I don't think we're dealing with just one fire here. We have, as well as having the fire here, this fire, we also are looking at the Palmer fire, and there were a lot of folks affected by the Palmer fire also, and are dealing with a lot of the same things. I really feel like Okanagan Dogs has done a great job of bringing feed and hay to our ranchers. There's been a whole lot of businesses that have stepped up. And so I think that those businesses continue to be good resources. I like to send people to the Farm Service Agency, the NRCS, and the Conservation District, because those folks are a wealth of resources for people in fire recovery. They can really help them and give them good direction. And I think that those are good resources. Also the OMAC Okanagan Long-Term Recovery Group is working really hard to do fencing and cleanup So I think there's
That's
a lot
all
of
the time we have. Sorry. Sorry to cut you off. But Shauna, if you'll take this next question, what do you think should be done at the local level to prevent a water crisis in our county?
Again, I'm going to emphasize that we need to get the water study done, and we need to get a comp plan in place that protects our water while still allowing for adequate growth and development in our county. I believe it needs to be a short, simple, and clear plan that's relatively free of regulations. Through my ranching background, I really understand how vital it is to be a good steward of the land. And I'm really motivated to develop a plan that protects our watersheds and our natural environment. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity to have that part in shaping our county's future through developing that sustainable comprehensive plan, one that considers the beautiful culture and heritage of our county, and one that will protect our natural resources for future generations while allowing for growth and development.
Thank you. Chris, what do you think should be done at a local level to prevent a water crisis in our county?
I think the most important thing is to be real. We have a watershed plan. We have one that we finished an addendum to, and there's some opposition to whether or not that should go to the state for approval. I think the initiating governments in that process are in agreement that it needs to go to the state so that we can get on with the projects that are identified in that plan to make water available for domestic exempt wells, because that's what the bill was about that we're responding to. But in an overall, on an overall basis, to be real about the planning efforts and the watershed plan that we have in place and implement it.
Thank you. Chris, if you'll take the next question. Maintaining the county road system is increasingly costly, and the pressure to keep county roads in good condition can tax resources. As a commissioner, what would you do to balance public needs and costs as they relate to the roads?
First of all, I think that one of the important things is that we do maintain standards in regards to the way development takes place, and to make sure that development is in the right place. Because the more demand we create out in the hinterlands, the more effective the transportation system is. So it's a land use issue, and it has to be tied to the transportation system. So that's very important. And then the other part of it is to maintain those roads. So we have to make sure that there's always funding available, and we do go after grants to do that. There's some available to, at the minimum, keep from losing roads to lack of maintenance. Those are key issues, and if we can make sure that we manage our budget so we're not borrowing from the road fund, that's a really big deal too.
Thank you. Shauna, same question. Maintaining the county road system is increasingly costly. The pressure to keep county roads in good conditions can tax resources. As a commissioner, what would you do to balance public needs and costs as they relate to the road system?
One of the things that I think is really important is that we maintain our roads. As we all know, when things get run down or maybe certain areas are not maintained to a certain standard, it costs a whole lot more to bring them back up where they need to be. And I think so, really focusing on maintenance and not as much on building new roads, but maintaining and repairing the ones that we have under our current budget would be my focus.
Okay, thank you. Shauna, prior to making a closing statement, the last question is there any issue that you would like to discuss that we didn't bring up?
I think that one of the things that I really would like us to focus on is the reopening of our schools. And I think that that's a topic that we didn't bring up, but I think it's sort of a top priority for everybody in our county. And I think that we need to just start really working very diligently to develop a plan that's going to work with our public health department and with the school system so that we can get our kids back in school. I know a lot of them are really struggling at this point because of lack of internet. Some are not good distance learners. And so I think it's important that we start looking at how to get them back in school.
Thank you. Chris, same question. Is there a topic that you would like to bring up that we didn't raise?
Well, I'd just like to throw in that that effort is well underway. It's not something we're starting to do. I've been heavily engaged with superintendents of public school or the schools in the county on that very issue. And a lot of things are easy to say, but they're not quite as easy to get done, but they are underway and there's good focus on that. I think that one thing that I repeat, but it is that land use planning is so important to all the costs that we incur in the county. And so if we don't pay close attention to how that happens, we increase our costs. And I'm very familiar with how that all works. I'm very interested in and intense on making sure that our regulations are easy to follow and there's less surprises and the little guy can get through the system without being burdened with regulations that the big guy that is able to pay his way through those regulations has available to them.
Thank you. Well, that's all the questions we have from the audience. Thank you, community, for sending those in. And we have time for 1 minute closing statements. And Chris, if you could give yours first.
Great. Well, one thing I just want to say is that, you got to be realistic about this work. It isn't easy. It takes a long time to really learn what's involved in it because there's a lot involved and it could take you a whole term to learn it. And I have ample experience, more than ample experience to continue this work. I'm passionate about it and I don't want to go backwards. So that's one of the reasons I'm hanging in there and running another term. So I just would say that vote for somebody that has a great deal of experience and knowledge about the systems that we're working with.
Thank you, Chris. Shauna, your closing statement.
Well, I love this county and therefore I am asking you to vote for me for the Okanagan County Commissioner position 1. As a lifelong resident of this county, I believe my experiences have given me insight into the needs and concerns of our county residents. With me, you know who you're getting, you know where I came from, you know where I stand, and I really believe that through hard work and determination, we can work together, just as our forefathers did, to grow our county while protecting its abundant natural resources and preserving its beauty for future generations. So I thank you for tonight, and I'll thank you for voting for me.
Thank you, Shauna Beeman and Chris Branch, running in the race for County Commissioner position 1. And I will remind the voters that in this general election, regardless of which district you reside in, you can vote for candidates in both position 1 and position 2. Thank you both for taking the time, for joining us, and for volunteering to serve our county in this position. Good luck to you both. If Keith, Chris and Shauna, if you could turn off your video and audio, and Katie and Andy, if you could join us, we'll make the transition to the position 2 forum. I see Andy. Are you able to hear me okay?
I am, George. Thanks.
And Katie?
Yes, I see you and hear you just fine.
Okay, welcome. Thanks for being patient. We have a couple of questions at the beginning that you've seen, and you have 2 minutes for the first 2 questions, 1 minute for all other questions, and a closing statement also at the end. So we'll start with you, Katie.
Okay,
I should say your full names. I don't think I've done that yet. Katie Haven is challenging the incumbent Andy Hover for position 2, County Commissioner. Katie, please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job, and what motivates you to take on a leadership role in our county government.
well, thank you. And I want to thank the Grange for doing this and allowing our voters to have an opportunity to meet their candidates. I grew up in Washington State, and I came to Okanagan County for the first time about 22 years ago. And like so many people, I fell in love with this place and decided I wanted to make it my permanent home. So 12 years ago, I was able to move here full time. I live on a small sheep ranch. You see a photo of it in the picture behind me with my partner, Bill. So before that, I had a career of almost 30 years as a senior officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine. I was a chief engineer on an ocean-going passenger ship. And I think that the skills that I honed during that career really translate well to what a county commissioner does. I ran a complex operation that required close attention to detail down to the smallest level. I had to keep my finger on the pulse and know what was going on. I worked with multi-million-dollar budgets. I had to manage large projects up against hard deadlines. And I was responsible for ensuring that compliance with regulations at all levels, from international down to local. And so I really learned how to do those things. And along the way, I earned a reputation for being a fair and effective leader. Why I want to run is I just see opportunities to do some things differently. I want to bring a fresh and proactive approach to how we run our county. I want to go out and seek out opportunities. I want to help make our county a place that has a reputation for having our act together, being ready for whatever the future brings, and a place where everyone feels welcome.
Thank you, Katie. Andy, same question. Please tell us about yourself and what it is in your experience that has most prepared you for this job, and what motivates you to take on a leadership role in our county government.
Thanks, George. Thanks to Grange for putting this on. I grew up here in the Met-How. I was born in Brewster. I've lived in Okanagan County for 44 years, so I've seen a lot of change that has gone on in this county. And I think that gives you an insight as to, how that change is going to move forward and where you came from and where you're going to go. After high school here, I went to Washington State University. I got a degree in agricultural technology management, and that, going to college, I enjoyed it. I think there's a lot of other things that kids can do also, but it teaches you critical thinking skills, which is really important being a county commissioner. After that, I went on, worked for nuclear power companies, traveled all over the country, really got an idea of how great this county really is. Right after that, managed businesses for 10 years, which, being in a leadership role and dealing with budgets, dealing with customer service, which I feel that county government is a service to the taxpayers and you have to treat it as such. Those are the things that really, I think, stand out. And then being a county commissioner for 4 years really brings to light the things that you need to work on and that you want to try to accomplish after those 4 years. The reason that I like doing it is I really like helping people, and I enjoy problem solving and doing that at a county level. You get to do it for such a broad base of people that it's really rewarding, and I just love doing my job.
Thank you, Andy. And if you could take the next question, also 2 minutes. If you are selected again to represent us as county commissioner, On what issues would you hope to have the most impact? And what do you think is working well? And what would you choose to focus on as your priorities for change?
Sure. I think that, as being a commissioner now for almost 4 years, land use and water really come up a lot. Those things, I think, carrying those into the next 4 years and having an impact on those is going to be really critical for us here. Housing issues, those tie into the water so greatly. You really need to look at the housing problem that we have for middle income earners that they want to move back here. Maybe they were kids here, went to high school here. They want to try to move back here, but they just can't afford to because there's not any really affordable housing for that middle income earner. I think going beyond that, there are a lot of different things that we've looked at, healthcare issues and transportation issues. All those are really important aspects in Okanagan County, as is the customs and cultures that we already have, our rural lifestyle, agriculture. Those are really important to me, and kind of taking that all forward in the next 4 years is really what I want to do. I think that the things that have been working well is the fiscal responsibility that we've started to attain with our moving out of a debt issue into having money in our savings. Those are things that really can be highlighted.
Thank you, Andy. Katie, same question. If you are selected to represent us as a county commissioner, on what issues would you hope to have the most impact? And what do you think is working well? And what would you choose to focus on as priorities for change?
Yeah, so I would like to have an impact and influence on helping us kind of get to the end of some of these processes and projects that have been hanging out there unfinished for a long time, like the comprehensive plan, for example. You mentioned it in the last segment that, we are under an order to get that done and it's still not done. So working to bring that to completion, I think is really important. Because as we've talked about, it is the foundation for the next steps of planning that are going to help guide us into the future. I think that in terms of what we've been doing right, I'm really pleased to see some movement on the access and transparency in our local government. I've advocated for quite some time about just simply getting our commissioner meetings on video. And now that's actually a reality. The county has done that. And it's been so helpful for people who really are interested in keeping up with what's going on. My priorities for change are kind of broad and general. I would just like to bring a different attitude and approach to our county's way of interacting with other people and our neighbors, and with the state government. I would like to be proactive about searching out opportunities. I would like to start accepting invitations to participate in conversations when invited. And I would like to, in general, just see the future not as a threat to be resisted, but as an opportunity to bring jobs and a decent way of life to our county. We have a beautiful place and people love it here, but they do tend to struggle. And I want to make people's lives a little bit better.
Thank you, Katie. And if you'll take the next question, you segued into this well. Okanagan County has failed to produce a workable comprehensive plan despite the 2017 court order requiring it to do so. How important is such a plan, and what are the potential benefits to county residents?
Oh, I just think it's very important. it is, as I said, it's the foundational document. You can't really do the rest of your planning and the next steps until the comprehensive plan is finished. And the benefits that provides are enormous. And not having a plan causes confusion and frustration for people. They need to have, they need to know what their options are. They need to know that they can make long-term decisions about what they're going to do with their, how they're going to live on their land in the future, and how their family is going to advance. And they need to know that that's going to happen without the rug being pulled out from underneath them and the rules changing in midstream. So it's just, it provides stability and a sense of knowing that your decisions are going to be final. So, yeah.
Thank you, Katie. And I should have mentioned that all questions from here on out are 1-minute responses. Andy, same question. The county has failed to produce a comprehensive plan despite a 2017 court order to do so. How important is such a plan, and what are the potential benefits to the county residents?
First of all, the court order to do so, we were in process of doing that, and it still is in process. We had transmitted it to the Planning Commission about a year ago, and they are diligently working on it and are almost finished with it. It is a very important document. It sets goals and policies for county development. And so as such, it's not a regulatory document. The regulations come in your zoning and your ordinances. And so you want to make sure that document gives you a good insight as to how you want the future to look, over a 20-year planning horizon, whether that's, like for us, it's a rural lifestyle, agriculture based, with development nodes around cities and towns. And that's I think what the majority of people want it to look like.
Thank you, Andy. Next question for you. Currently, the public meetings of the Board of County Commissioners and the hearing examiner have many people attending and participating without wearing masks. Would you support a health and safety requirement that all people attending public county meetings wear masks?
Yes, I would. So that's the short answer. I mean, I just returned from a trip to Wyoming, and I wear a mask in the meetings because of that. And I wear a mask when I go into the stores because they ask you to. They're private businesses, and that's what they want you to do, so I do it. So yeah, if when you get right now, when you're having enough people together, you either need to spread them out, or you need to wear masks. That's what we've been doing. It seems to be working right now. We want to get the schools, our incidence rates are dropping now. They're down below 75, which means that the schools can now get kids back in to do it. So yeah, I would, until we're at a point where we think that we can get out of this.
Thank you, Katie. Same question. Would you support a health and safety requirement that all people attending public county meetings wear masks?
Yes, I would. And I think it's only fair to do that, because our small businesses, or all of our businesses, are required to do that for them and their customers. And so we should be leading the example by doing that in our own county offices and in our county public meetings. I find it interesting. I guess I haven't seen all the commissioner meetings on video. I've watched quite a few of them. And what I've seen is that our commissioners are not all wearing their masks. So I am really glad to hear that my opponent wants to start doing that.
Thank you. Katie, the next question for you. The county budget has seen significant correction or reduction of our debt in recent years, but balancing the budget isn't all there is to governing. Underfunding public health and failing to be in compliance with wildfire protection guidelines leave us out of potential funding sources. How would you build a budget which meets the needs for these programs?
Well, I don't think that the county can fund everything to the extent that we would like to. We do have to be realistic about our budget, but we have tools at our disposal. We can go out and leverage what we have by reaching out and seeking out other opportunities. There is funding out there for some things in the form of grants, but we have to go out and find it. And so I would use the money that's in our budget to fund positions for people whose job is to go out and find more money. And it's kind of a multi-layered approach, but I just think that that is the smartest thing to do. And we're going to have to sharpen our pencils and really figure out where those opportunities are and go out and get them.
Thank you. Andy, same question. The county budget has seen significant reduction of our debt in recent years, but balancing the budget isn't all there is to governing. Underfunding public health and failing to be in compliance with wildfire protection guidelines, leave us out of potential funding sources. How would you build a budget which meets the needs for these programs?
So first of all, in response to the wildfire protection program, last year, the commissioners allocated $35,000 out of the monies from the Forest Service that we get in order to help fund finishing up that program or those plans, and that is actually happening right now. As far as public health has its own budget. So the county allocates right now about $145,000 a year that it actually pays to public health, which isn't a great amount, but when current expense only has a $23 million budget and we have to spread that money out over all the services. We have really good public health officials that go out and get grants. We also allocated over $500,000 worth of CARES Act money to public health. So.
Thank you. Next question, Andy. There are increasing climatic changes impacting our county. We need to be able to react to both short-term needs and long-term planning. What actions would you advocate to prepare for the consequence of these changes?
Better forest health management. So continuing to be a member of the Forest Health Collaborative is really critical. And then we are in the midst of developing a well tracking piece of software that prior to all the water issues, when somebody went to drill a well, the county usually didn't know that they were drilling a well. So there's not a lot of tie back to records with the Department of Ecology. So I think that implementing a good accounting program of how many permit exempt wells that we have here in Okanagan County in Wire 48 and Wire 49 is going to be really essential to knowing how much water we're actually withdrawing. And then metering programs. I'm actually for metering programs that have a sunset clause in them to determine how much water people are actually using, so we can get a better estimate of what we're doing.
Thank you, Katie. Same question. There's increasing climatic changes impacting our county. We need to be able to react to both short-term and long-term planning. What actions would you advocate to prepare for the consequence of these changes?
Well, I think the first thing we can do is tap into the wealth of knowledge that is out there. I think that in the Manhow, we have a climate change action group that was formed a year or two ago, and the county was invited to participate, and they declined to do so. And I think that that's a mistake. I think we should participate in what our community is putting together in terms of what they want to see us do to prepare for the changing climate. And there's also a similar program that has started at the state level. Our Commissioner of Public Lands has come up with a statewide climate action plan that is very locally focused. Her desire is to put the control of that in the hands of the local governments. And so we can partner with people and other groups that are working on this project and have been for a long time. And and that includes bringing jobs. Some of the solutions that they're proposing will actually provide some jobs in our area.
Okay, thank you, Katie.
George?
Yes, rebuttal?
Sorry about that. Yeah. So
Sorry
just
to
for the
see you
record,
over there.
that's okay. Just for the record, the county did not decline to be in that climate change group. Commissioners have a lot of meetings and a lot of boards that they are on, and so they are stretched thin when it comes to being on different committees, different boards, and things like that. We try to attend as many as we can, but there was no declining of being in that group.
Okay, thank you. Andy, if you'll take, actually, no, Katie, it's your turn to take the first response to this question about water. What do you think should be done at the local level to prevent a water crisis in our county?
Well, I think that we should look at what our watershed groups are doing. We have a Medhow Watershed Council, and we have a watershed planning group for the Okanagan Valley as well. And I think we should give them the tools that they need to come up with their proposals that they have spent a long time working on. And I think that the county should look at those proposals and implement them. I also think that just planning, good, smart planning about growth, look at the competing needs. I see that we, in my mind, we have planning and development and agriculture and keeping our fish habitat healthy. All three of those things are important, and we have to figure out how much water each of those needs will require, and then figure out how to plan smartly so that all of them can have what they need to thrive.
Thank you. Andy, same question. What do you think should be done at a local level to prevent a water crisis in our county?
The prevention of that, I think, is more of a long-term project. I think short-term that we need to, again, define how much water we're using, understand that with a better accounting system of permanent exempt wells, tracking, implementing, again, metering studies to find out how much water we're actually using, to determine kind of what the capacity is of that natural resource, and then work to develop land use and policy around those, along with your power grid, your transportation grid, and all the other things that we need to look at.
Thank you. Andy, next question for you. And this one starts with a little bit of a lengthy quotation from the community member who sent this in. And quote, "At a recent peaceful demonstration in Omak, there were civilians armed with semi-automatic rifles on rooftops and in front of businesses claiming to protect Omak property from destruction at the hands of demonstrators. The sheriff claimed that this kind of armed presence was legal as long as it was not intimidating to demonstrators or other residents. Men or women armed with such weapons do not constitute a well-regulated militia, and their presence was very intimidating to me." So that's the quote. And then the questions: do you approve of this kind of armed civilian presence in our community? And do you think that such a presence could have a chilling effect on free speech?
I approve of peaceable assembly. I approve of the right to keep and bear arms. I also know that our sheriff is an elected official, and he is the one who needs to determine whether or not it becomes a militia or whether or not it's intimidating. For county commissioners, all we can do is try to to set examples for people, that, and, earlier Commissioner Branch alluded to the fact that, or stated that, we'd signed a resolution that said, that violence is not, the way to peaceable discussions, and it's not. So, like I said, I believe in our Constitution. I believe in the rights of people to assemble. I believe in the right to keep and bear arms. I also believe that the safety of individuals can be handled through the sheriff's department from an elected official.
Thank you. Katie, same question. I won't read the whole quote, but unless you want me to, but do you approve of this kind of armed civilian presence in our communities? Do you think that such a presence could have a chilling effect on free speech?
Well, I do think it can have a chilling effect. I think that if people feel intimidated and scared and that they're going to be in the presence of armed people who are not of law enforcement, I think it can have a chilling effect. I've read the state laws around this, and from what I understand, just armed citizens in a group is not considered a legal form of protection and gathering. And I know that law has not been tested in court, and so the jury's still out on that. But I think that part of the problem in that particular case was that there was misinformation put out about these potential looters and vandals. And I think that we need to make a really good effort in vetting the information that we're getting about potential threats before we take extreme action.
Thank you, Katie. And for you, next question. One of the greatest assets for economic viability in our county is our natural world. It supports sustainable harvest, hunting, tourism, and our quality of life. Please share your views on how best to preserve these assets.
Well, I think that we need to, again, have a smart plan. We need to acknowledge what the future holds as best we can. We need to use the best tools of science and prediction that we have to see what is coming down the pike at us. And we need to be realistic about solutions to problems. We've already talked a lot about water, and water is huge. Water is a resource that provides so much of the resources that we use in terms of our forest habitat and our rivers, and even our winter recreation in terms of skiing and so forth. So just managing our resources and being realistic about not taking actions that we know are going to put those at risk is really important.
Andy, same question. One of the greatest assets for economic viability in our county is our natural world. It supports sustainable harvest, hunting, tourism, and our quality of life. Please share your views on how to best preserve these assets.
Well, I'm an avid hunter and fisherman, and I really believe in trying to preserve, as much property as we can for the natural environment. I mean, you have to manage development and growth with, the competing needs of wildlife and things of that nature. So, conservation easements. I know that a lot of, I've heard a lot of people in the conservative world, they don't like conservation easements too much. I personally think they work well when they're done correctly. You get a safe, agriculture brings in a lot of wildlife. You can have somebody who can develop a small piece of property and then have a larger tract of land. Also good forest health management. I mean, animals do not like to live in burned out forests. So keeping our forests healthy for the fish and for wildlife is important too.
Thank you. Next question, Andy. Maintaining the county road system is increasingly costly, and the pressure to keep the county roads in good condition can tax resources. What would you do to balance the public needs and costs as they relate to the roads?
Well, like in particular over here in the Met House, when I came into office, our gravel pits were played out, and we were going to have a hard time. We were going to have to truck gravel from over in our central gravel pit over in Okanagan to over here, which puts a tax on the road system, the infrastructure there. So finding a new pit site was critical, and we went through public process, some public meetings to figure out how to, how best to go about that. And we made some concessions about when we were going to have that go on. And now we have a pit that's going to work for the next 100 years. We just got opened bid for gravel crushing that came in at about $180,000 less than our engineer's estimate. So trying to, the other thing that we have an amazing engineer who is very conscious of his budget. And so having all those things together, I think does the job.
Thank you. Katie, same question. Maintaining the county road system is increasingly costly, and the pressure to keep the roads in good condition can tax resources. What would you do to balance public needs and costs as they relate to the roads?
Yeah, well, everybody wants to have safe roads and deserves to have safe roads. And so I think it's important. I think that we need to be mindful of the budget and, plan our maintenance accordingly, space out the intervals at which we repave if necessary. But also I want to touch back on what Chris Branch said in the previous segment, that it also does have to do with planning and development. You need to be mindful of where your development occurs and the costs of building new roads and maintaining those roads. So it's all part of the bigger picture, and you have to really look at your plan and make sure you factor in all of those costs as you make your decisions about how we're going to grow into the future.
Thank you. So before we go to closing statements, the final question, and for you first, Katie, is there an issue or a topic that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to talk about? 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks. I'd just like to touch on the wildfire preparation. I think that wildfires are so foremost in our mind now. I lived through the one in 2014. I know what people are going through. And in terms of the recovery, I think that, I see kind of two pieces of that. I see the long-term recovery, and we have a really good long-term recovery group already set up. And I think the county needs to, direct people to them for their long-term recovery needs. I think where we can do better is in short-term rapid response. We did a fantastic job. The crew at our fairgrounds and all the volunteers, they did an amazing job getting resources to people, but it was all kind of done on the fly, and they figured it out. But I think we would do well to have a plan for a rapid response in the future to meet the needs of everyone, and sit down at the beginning of every fire season and go over that plan with the community and all the stakeholders, so that we know that everything's fresh in our mind and we're ready if this is the year when a fire hits again.
Thank you. Andy, is there an issue or topic that you would like to bring up that we didn't ask you about?
Yeah, we didn't talk about housing or education. I think those two things are actually really important. I touched on the education piece a little bit, my own college experience, but living in a rural county like this, I think that we need to get more trade programs going, that because I think there's a lack of interest from schools in pushing kids towards those trades programs. They want kids to go to college and things like that, and some kids just aren't ready for it. And so I think that's something that really the county, we've talked about it. I think that we really need to help with that, to work on getting more of those programs into Okanagan County so we can keep more of our kids coming back. And then the housing issues, working on, because that plays right into if kids want to come back, they need to have a affordable housing that they can actually, afford to pay the mortgage on a a working person's salary.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close this session with closing statements by both candidates. Andy, you have 1 minute to make yours.
Thanks, George. I just want to say thanks to everybody who supported me in the first election and voted for me, and the people that are supporting me in this election and who are going to vote for me. I want to say thanks to the Grange and thanks to everybody who's watching today. It's, I think it's critical that people be educated on who you're going to vote for and who's representing you in government. And big thanks to all of the firefighters and all the EMS folks and all of the volunteers and all the first responders, excuse me, that did an amazing job in the huge emergency situations that we've had. So I want to put that out there to folks, and your ballots will be out in a few days, and I hope that you vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Katie?
Well, I just want to thank everyone for watching tonight and doing your civic duty and learning about who you're going to vote for. I just want to say that over the last few weeks and months, I have talked to many, many voters on the phone, and I've spent quite a few days walking around the neighborhoods in most of the larger towns in our county. And I have really ended up being very hopeful about our future. We've got a lot of divisiveness and things going on the national level, but here in our county, what I see is neighbors living next to each other who take care of each other, no matter what signs are in their yard. I've had conversations with people who identify from a completely different political perspective than me, but by the time we're done talking, they have smiles on their faces and they are thanking me for asking them what they think. They say that they have never encountered that before. And so I am eager to bring that spirit of openness and cooperation to our county, and I would love to earn your vote.
Thank you, Katie Haven and Andy Hover, for your very thoughtful responses to these questions that came from our community. And best of luck to both of you in the upcoming election. At this time, to wrap things up, I'd invite all 6 candidates to come back on the screen if you're still there. And I'd like to thank you again for this evening and for your dedication to serve the people of your region, your county, in public office. I saw a lot of integrity, a lot of energy, a lot of great ideas tonight from everybody. Thanks again at the Twisp Valley Grange. Our timekeeper is Simon Windell. Behind the scenes, Stephen Terry Dixon, Wendy Braden, and our host and leader tonight, Val Hecker. Thank you very much for making this happen. Once again, your ballots for this election should be mailed to you by around October 16th, and they need to be postmarked before Election Day, November 3rd. And all county residents can vote in all 3 of these races. So thanks again. This is George Schneider. It's been an honor to be the moderator this evening. Good luck to all of you candidates, and thanks everyone for